Welcome to the Well Workplaces podcast, where we chat with health and wellbeing leaders that are on a mission to create and support positive changes in the workplace. I'm your host, Tom Bosner, and co-founder of Well Workplaces, and also the managing director here at Pinnacle Health Group. And today I'm excited to be speaking with Debra Roberts, who's the author of The Relationship Protocol. Debra, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Tom.
Debra, where are you coming from today?
I am coming from New York.
Amazing.
Across the water.
Amazing. Yeah, it's great. It's great to be connecting with you. And today's topic is how to communicate with clarity during the Great Resignation, which the Great Resignation as a term, we were just talking about that before we went live. And I feel like the US, where you are, it's a little bit more progressed. Where I am in Australia, it's only becoming sort of mentioned now in Australia as we, I guess, go through our management of COVID and also just come to the end of that huge shift that we've all gone through in the workplace. Yeah. And just to introduce this topic and why it's important, I think, for this type of podcast is because in employee wellbeing, this show is really around workplace wellbeing and how HR and wellbeing leaders can support employees through this massive change that we've gone through. Mm-hmm. And I think when it comes to employee wellbeing, sometimes we think of the initiatives that we might run in a company, or we might be thinking more along the lines of perks. But I feel like one of the most undervalued wellbeing initiatives or wellbeing strategies is actually just being really clear with your communication. And as we've just gone through 18 months of a huge, once in a lifetime sort of workplace transformation, a lot of individuals or employees or people are probably asking themselves a few questions. They're probably asking themselves, firstly, number one, what am I passionate about? Probably number two, what am I good at? And also, thirdly, how can I make money out of what I'm good at and what I'm passionate about? And so everyone's had a lot of time to consider this. And so it's quite interesting just to, I guess, give that some thought, because time has the 18 months of this pandemic has really created a great opportunity for a lot of people as well, just to take a stop and zoom out and have a bit of a think. And so, Debra, we might just sort of link in there. I'd like to sort of introduce people, but it'd be great if you could introduce yourself and maybe talk about what your specialty is.
Sure. So, hi, everybody. I am Debra Roberts. I call myself a conversation expert, and I developed a communication model called the Relationship Protocol, which is a practical communication model that can be used everywhere from the boardroom to conversations across your kitchen table. And it gives you the tools you need to speak to your staff, for coworkers to talk to each other, as well as conversations that you want to have with loved ones and friends, because people are people. It's uncomplicated language that I use and practical, actionable kinds of tools. So these days, when we can speak directly and get our point across, can make a big difference.
I love that. I like simple language. I'm a simple person personally, and I think sometimes in the workplace, there's been that evolution of jargon and big words, or people making things complex, maybe to sound important or to make things complex, when really what we should be doing through communication is simplifying and making sure that people understand what's going on from both sides.
Yes, that's a critical part. I love what you said, because I do think that for some reason, many people make communication so much more complicated than it needs to be. And I'm all about simplicity. It's not necessarily easy, but it can be uncomplicated and more practical and less fancy to get your point across. And that's the kind of stuff that I love to do. Take these complicated things that people avoid having these conversations. On my website, I have a download called Tell Me What to Say, and it covers the 3 most common conversations that people avoid and how to have them. So that tells you everything right there.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. And I think I'm probably, to be honest, I think I'm guilty of being a overly complex communicator maybe 5 years ago when I was running the business at Pinnacle Health Group, and I feel like maybe I made things more complicated on reflection. And because I've had 18 months to reflect on it, and now we've gone through a simplification process through our business, and I feel like now I get it, and also the importance of knowing that people understand what you're trying to say couldn't be more important now and over the last 18 months when employees have been working remotely most of that time.
Yeah. Sometimes I suggest you can't really over communicate when someone is working remotely. And if you are, they'll tell you. But under communicating leaves them isolated and disconnected. So which one's worse? Having them say, okay, I got it. You care, or you're interested, or you want to talk to me, versus, hello, I'm here. Does anybody notice?
Mm.
So I go with the over part, but it's not
But
complicated, just connecting.
yeah, really important message there. Now, given we are talking about the Great Resignation, I feel like in the US you're ahead of us in terms of this term. I mean, using the word "great's" probably not the incorrect word to be using with this. What is the Great Resignation, Deborah?
So I recently heard that another name for it is the big quit, which kind of like
Yeah,
that, right?
that's
So
better. Yeah, that's better.
kind of short and to the point. It covers since last spring until now, really present day, millions and millions of employees have voluntarily left their jobs. There was one month, I don't remember if it was July or April, where 4 million people left their jobs. And they're leaving um, for all different reasons, and across all industries. So it's a matter of not being happy in the workplace, but also seeking better compensation, more challenging jobs, different long-term career goals. But a lot of it is happiness, wanting to feel that they are appreciated and they are getting something out of this environment. Is the workplace flexible? Are they kind? That type of a thing. Is their communication? So, one of the things that I think is super important is when you talk about wellness and we talk about communication, they really do go hand in hand of what is missing in a lot of companies. And the pandemic really brought that to the surface. People got to see, do they care about me? Do they notice that I don't have the equipment I need to do my job effectively? Everything from that to, are we having meetings? Are people at the different layers getting lost? So employers are now struggling to hire and retain employees. The power dynamic has shifted, and now you have employees who, I think it's 87 unemployed to 100 jobs, per 100. So there's more jobs that are available than people looking at this point. So, or
Wow.
yeah, they'd rather be working in an environment that suits them for whatever reason, and they are all different reasons. There's not, I think, there are many different articles you can read that coin different top fives, but they're pretty much around the same things that I'm mentioning.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, isn't it? I think the 18 months has meant that people are probably searching for a little bit more meaning in their work that they do. Work's a really important part of your identity in some ways as well, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
people in Western cultures anyway, they identify themselves probably firstly by the job they do, which I think now people are probably have had time to think, is that really how I want to be
Yeah.
identified or labeled? And also, is the company that I work in reflective of what I believe in now?
There's something that I call soldiering, which is a term that I use when we're just doing what we need to do to get the job done. And I think it's a little bit of what you're talking about, that we're busy and we're working. We just do what we need to do. And when we're soldiering, everybody does it at different times. But if you're doing it without awareness, and if you're doing it and you don't even realize what's going on, that the quality of your life is not as great as it could be, then when you have this halt where everything shifts, people are saying, I don't want to commute for an hour to get to my job, or I want to spend more time with my family, or I don't want to work for someone that's, ugh, not
Mm.
caring about me, or interested in any feedback type of a thing. So when we were forced to stop and slow down, while it could be uncomfortable for many people and um, anxiety producing. I mean, it brought up stress, it brought up all sorts of emotional upheaval for people. And I'm also, I don't always introduce myself fully, but I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I have a mental health background. I also have a trauma background. I'm a certified EMDR not instructor, but professional. And I also have done business consulting. So combined, this pandemic brought everything to the surface for people. So when you're talking about trauma and stress and everything that went with it, you have people who weren't coping as well, understandably for different reasons. And were companies responsive to them? And it mattered. This time it mattered because they had enough time to stop and actually self-reflect, which most of the time we're going, and we don't do that. So that was a big part of this as well.
Yeah, really interesting. I think people that are working now, or and are now coming back, if they've come back to work, they're probably also going, in their head, they don't. No one really wants to be seen as an employee anymore. They want to be seen as an individual person with individual needs. And so,
Mhm.
for leaders of business, or managers, or people in HR, it's kind of like there needs to be customization to the person of what
Yeah.
their goals are as well. So, like what you were saying, the dynamic and the power
Mhm.
shift from the employer to the employee is really the thing, right?
The term I've been hearing is human centric,
Yep.
which I kind of like. I'll give you all the terms I hear. Um, and I, listening to someone, everybody wants to be heard. When you talk about direct communication or clear communication, everybody wants to be heard. You don't have to solve all their problems, but you have to start listening to them. And I think that's what you're saying as well, that it's and then adapt, because that's what the people, as we all know, are the success of the company. So if you're going to listen to them, then you can decide what to do for the future, and where you need to adapt. And if you're not going to adapt, then figure it out yourself. So
That's it. Yeah, and I think from my perspective, thinking of workplace well-being, it's a space that we've worked in for a long time now. What we are hearing through the workplaces that are still working remotely here in Melbourne and Sydney and other parts of Australia, that people are working remotely. They're quite fatigued in the environment that they're in.
mhm.
That they are, and they're not wanting a one solution for the whole team. They're wanting that one-on-one time with their leader or their manager to really understand, well, I'm juggling kids at home, I'm trying to work, what's important right now. So I feel like that clarity in what's important work and how it lines up with the overall business goal is also a huge factor, right?
It's critical. It's really critical. And I I've been telling the story of a woman that I spoke to early on during the pandemic, who never worked remotely before. And a lot of different people were calling her at home and relying on her to give them some assistance. And she wasn't getting her work done. And her manager never reached out to her to say, why are you not getting your work done? She started getting criticized because she wasn't getting her work done. She didn't have the voice. She didn't know how to communicate to ask for what she needed. And she didn't want to tell on these people, so to speak, that they were interfering with her work, because she felt she would be tattling on them and didn't want to be a complainer. So she was torn, and she ended up kind of getting depressed and anxious and wasn't sure and was ready to leave her job. And then her manager said, in a conversation, could see it in her face and said, "What's going on?" I fault the manager because it's the manager's job to not just say, "What's going on?" or "How you doing?" and leave it at that. Ask a follow-up question. Tell me, is there some way I can support you? Help me understand what a day is like now. How is it different now than it was? And with the Great Resignation, a lot of what people are talking about is say to the people on the way out, is there something I don't know about the company? And I don't know if it should be you necessarily talking to them. I don't know, the different roles, but it's got to be someone that they're comfortable speaking with, giving honest feedback to. How do we get people to not be talking to recruiters? What can we do to keep people that we're not doing? And then listen
Mm,
to those answers. But it's the managers have a huge role in creating collaboration and connection and innovation, really, and inspiring people. And if you don't have good communicators in that role, you have women like the person that I'm talking about, and that's just one person. And she was on the periphery of a very large organization. So she got lost, but she was a
mm,
person. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting because what you're also commenting on there is that the style of leadership that used to be important, which was the person that stands up the front with the vision and the maybe more charismatic sort of approach to things,
right.
it's changed a lot in the last 2 years, I think, whereby it's actually the person with the ability to actively listen that
Mhm.
can really get the job done in a one-to-one or one to a few
Yeah.
team setting. Do you agree with that?
I do. What I would add is I think that one person can make a huge difference in an organization when they're in a leadership role. So if you have a leader at the top, they can be charismatic, but they have to be communicative and they have to be transparent and they have to be direct, and that trickles down. If not, you have to your point, you have to have leaders at different levels in managerial positions and positions of authority who have communication skills that can address things and reach out to people and listen and respond. Because when you're running a meeting with a team, if you don't know how to get people to how to navigate the conversations, you're having a bigger problem than you think. And people aren't going to be committed, and commitment is actually a big thing that I talk about. How do you demonstrate your commitment? And if you have leaders who aren't behaving in committed ways that let people know, I have your back. I have both feet in here. I have your back, but you need to do that for me too. You
Mm,
have to model what you want people to do. And that's I think the most important role that a leader.
yeah, I love that one, and we see that in workplaces for well-being, where maybe in some organisations where we have a well-being strategy and a plan and a program, and the CEO kind of brings it all together by being present and talking about the well-being of their staff. We get so much more engagement in those environments versus some, and there's actually, unfortunately, there's quite a few where the director or the leader is not present for the what might seem like a small thing. If they're not there, then basically the program or the strategy doesn't take off because it's not seen as an accepted. It's not seen as a culture of well-being. It's seen as something that they've bought to be implemented in, but they're not present in the actual delivery or the engagement of the whole thing.
I found a little bit of that as well with my program. As you know, I have an online program as well, teaching communication, effective communication, dealing with conflicts, and when it's just a program that people are told to be in, that's the other side of the coin. If they're told to do it and they don't buy in, I almost want to say to them, please don't show up because I can't make you learn. You have to see this from the top. I want them to know the value. I almost want to say,
Mm,
I'm not going to let you take this program if you don't value it, because then you're not going to put the effort in and you're wasting your money and you're wasting your time and our time. But I think when people care and when they know that it matters and when it is shown from the leadership, then to your point, it makes such a big difference. And I have companies that created an application process for people to be in my program so that they really got that buy-in. And then the ones that weren't in were like, what? Wait a minute. So we were like, all right, you could come too.
That's really clever. I like that. It's a great way to create more engagement. That's
It was
perfect.
so clever. And then they gave me the application. They said, "What do you want to do?" Yeah, I'm going to use that.
That is awesome. I'm going to steal that idea. One of the best tools for employee wellbeing is clear communication, obviously. And what I'm interested in, Deborah, is what do you feel like are some of the most common misunderstandings or issues in the current workplace setting? What are you seeing in terms of communications and misunderstandings?
I think that there's a misunderstanding that people in leadership know how to communicate. I mean, I think that's the first thing. And so everybody looks to leadership to be a good communicator. And it's not happening. They're really good with policies and implementing policies, even with diversity or inclusion. Let's put another policy out there. But are you creating an environment of belonging and psychological safety? And what are you doing? So I think
Mm,
that misunderstanding. I think thinking that you need to solve problems when someone presents a problem to you, that you have to solve it rather than letting them know you've heard them and you are acknowledging what they're saying. That's a big part of it. And I I think that a lot of companies don't realize that everybody has a place and everybody is important. And when they don't acknowledge this, particularly this new shift, they're going to be left behind because the employees now get to say, this is what we need. This is the kind of leadership we want. This is the kind of compensation. Yeah, I mean, if they can do the compensation, but
mm,
these are the kind of benefits that we want. And they don't have to be monetary benefits, but something that lets them know that they're in it together, that there's this sense of connection. Because a lot of times when there's conflict, it's ignored. That's another thing that brush everything under the table, and you can't do that. You have to be able to learn how to resolve conflicts easily, and that's one of the. I mean, I can talk to you about that as well. But there are very simple things that you can do to resolve a conflict, dissolve it, not dissolve, diffuse it before it escalates. And many times you have people in positions who don't know what to do. They're uncomfortable with it, so they either ignore it or they let it happen and watch. And you have people in meetings that are going crazy, and that's not a good look.
mm. Yeah, and really nicely put about. I think leaders they're not necessarily trained in the art of communication, and especially in like in a remote setting. This whole change happened very quickly, and leaders had to really catch up
Yeah.
to knowing how to approach this. And
Mhm.
speaking from, I guess, what I did as a leader of my business is I did lots of I felt like I really over communicated and almost overdid it. Whereby I was doing broadcast videos out to my team as a weekly summary of trying to summarize everything that's happened for the week because we had lots of staff. And then I ran that strategy for a while, and then I realized, oh, gee, I haven't spoke to everyone one-on-one for a while. So it was kind of like learning on the fly, and I still don't feel like I've got it. I've got it really perfect. Deborah, you mentioned that some leaders don't know how to diffuse those situations. And I feel like in a remote setting, issues are probably bubbling up without the leader really knowing because everyone's working, remotely and you can't see them. I'm wondering if you could expand on how of how do you what are some strategies on if you are needing to diffuse or just sort of take an issue head on with someone.
I'm going to address that, but I want to also rubber stamp what you just said. Also, I think in your business, when you said you were over communicating or whatever you were doing, I think what you did though was you came across well intended. And so I think that when your staff knows that you're well intended in whatever you do, that's your commitment, and people will respond positively, even if they're saying, "Okay, we got it," enough with the videos. But the point is that they trust you, And trust has to be at the core of trusting your intentions. And so I think that's a really important point to mention too. So conflict. The biggest thing about conflict is if you're having a conversation with someone and I say something and then you say something and I can tell this isn't going well, what happens is we're still talking, we continue talking about the topic. What I want you to do is stop talking about the topic and start talking about what's happening between you and the other person. So we're having a conversation and I do this, things are leveling up and, or you could feel the tension. And I stop what I'm saying and I say to you either what's going on, what just happened, because it looks like you're getting upset. And then I get quiet and I listen and you say, I don't like the way you spoke to me. Or, I mean, it depends on the relationship, obviously, but I'm upset about what we're talking about. And as the person who has asked you, I don't get to say, well, too bad, or well, I feel that way too. As soon as we do that, we make it a back and forth. And now we're not diffusing, we're continuing, or we're intensifying. So the best thing to do in that moment is if I've said something that you don't like, depending on the relationship, I can say to you, that wasn't my intention. I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention. Now, I really may think that you're being ridiculous in why you're having that reaction. It doesn't matter. It's how you feel. If I say to you, you're being ridiculous, I've lost you. But if I say, I'm sorry, that wasn't my intention, or I don't even have to say I'm sorry, but that wasn't what I was looking to accomplish. If we have a closer relationship, I might say something a little bit more. I'm very sorry that I hurt your feelings. Give me the benefit of the doubt. Trust my intentions. That isn't where I was going with it. But you stop talking about the topic and you start talking about what's happening between you. So another suggestion is to say, you know what, this is getting a little tense, or it seems like we are not agreeing on this. Can we hit the pause button and take a moment to try and approach it differently? Or why don't you speak and I'll listen and then I'll tell you what I'm thinking and then I'll do the same. There's all sorts of things you can do, but don't stay in the conflicted interaction, because you will most often not have the resolution that you're hoping to have. But quickly diffuse. It's a really great diffuser. I don't even to just say, I don't want to argue with you about this. I really don't want to argue with you about this. Can we table this? Or can we say we're going to agree to disagree, but that's okay. We don't have to agree on this. But think about everything that's going on even in the world, right? Where so many people don't agree. We still have to be able to be civilized. I can say to you, I don't like the tone that you're using while you're talking to me about this. And what I want you to say to me is, I don't even realize I'm using a tone, but if you think I am, I'm sorry, that's not what I want to do. I want you to be able to speak freely. You're not owning or apologizing or saying, give me the benefit of the doubt or trust my intentions for everything you've ever done. You don't have to win every interaction or the argument. It's just for that piece, what they're expressing to you, because how you speak to someone is more important than what you're saying. And
yeah,
it's a critical part when you're trying to diffuse a conflict. You have to matter to me because you're my business partner, because you're my employee, because you're my partner in life, whatever it is. So how you feel matters to me. That's why I stop talking about whatever I'm making my point or winning the argument because I'm right. And I care about how you're reacting. And I look at you because I'm paying attention. I'm turning toward you. I'm noticing you. So when there's a conflict, I can stop it quicker. If I'm distracted and not paying attention or not really caring, that's the other way it continues. That was kind of my explanation, but is that helpful?
No, that's really great. I think really nice to just explore that a little bit, because I feel like sometimes, well, I'm speaking mainly from the environment that we're in Australia, which is it's still that, and it's probably the same in the US. However, we're still relatively in a lockdown situation, so they're going through their own individual sort of issues at home, whether that's trying to manage kids, maybe financial pressure, trying to work from home. The expectations now are really different. Like, we're not expecting people to work at full capacity. So I feel like also a nice kind of easy bridge to all of this is trying to, as a leader in amongst this, is understanding how what people are also going through in their personal life, opening that door up for a conversation, because the reality is the person asking the question is probably having the same issues at home.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing for me is I think this is the first time that we're all experiencing the same thing, maybe at different times. I'm not, on lockdown now, but we were for a long time. I mean, I'm in New York. We got hit so hard in the
Mm,
beginning, and it was, and they didn't know about the virus. They didn't understand it. I mean, I was going to the grocery store with 2 sets of gloves and, 2 masks, and when do I take the second set of gloves off? And what, like, what can I touch? And we didn't know anything, and it was scary, and it's scary in general now that we even have more information. But the key is to be sensitive and be direct. And we were saying before, it doesn't have to be an extensive conversation, but it can be, I want to check in on you. I just want to see how you're doing. I don't know what your stress level is like. You want to give me on a scale of 0 to 10? Is there something we can do to support you? And I talk a lot about how to um, deal with emotional triggers and things like that, because that happens, particularly if you're working at home and your kids are at home or you have family there. A lot of people are forced to be in environments that they didn't expect to be in for longer periods of time. I was talking to someone who said, as soon as I finish here, I have to go out and tell my wife that when I'm in meetings, they can't be, doing X, Y, and Z outside the door. I don't even know how to say that to her because I'm in business mode. So people go from, home to work to home to work, and they have to switch hats, and it's a lot of pressure and a lot of stuff going on, sharing space for all different functions. It's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. You're right though. The whole thing is a great leveler in some ways, in that it's,
It's
everyone's going through the same things but in different ways. So kind of creating that connection on that level can sometimes be a nice bridge to having an open conversation with someone. But also, the reason I wanted to get into the conflict sort of piece there is because sometimes, because of this stress levels, people have then avoided maybe issues that are brewing, and so
mm,
that probably then leads to a juncture where maybe there is more,
that's right.
not hardcore conflict, but just people not saying what they mean, and so how to get that out of them was really nice to go through. Deborah, one other thing I've been thinking about is, and mainly probably because I'm thinking ahead for our own business as well, is kind of communicating ahead now. Like, we kind of know where we're heading with coming back to work, and our plans for where our business is going to head. Um, and I've had a lot of conversations with other business owners. It's kind of like, the question is kind of like, how do you provide that clarity and connection for when you're kind of talking about what's going to happen, to try and, I guess, communicate to the people that work with you, or are employed by you, just to create a really clear path for everyone, I guess. Do you have any strategies or thoughts around that?
So I want to be clear of what you're asking. Are you asking how do you communicate what's going to be happening within the company going forward? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, how do you provide clarity for your team about the future?
Well, I think directly, to be honest, with kindness, but direct, and being sensitive to knowing that everybody does have different circumstances. So, the first thing I would suggest is, if you can have one on one conversations with people and really listen to where they're at and what their circumstances are and what they're hoping for, then putting that all together. But once you figure it out, it's starting with the positives. So appreciate meeting with all of you and connecting with you. When you start with a positive statement, you get someone's buy-in. You get more, who doesn't want a compliment, or do you appreciate my time? Great. Oh, good. I'm glad to be here then. So it could be as simple as that, or you're the best team, saying something that is appreciative, is positive, and then state your intentions up front. I want to meet with you now we're going to meet for this amount of time, and our agenda is to cover X, Y, and Z. I want you to have clarity about where we're headed and what we're doing. I've taken everything that you've said into account, and this is the plan that we've set forth, and we hope that you feel good about it. You're important to us, and we want you to stay with the team, and we'll have time for questions at the end. So I would start with something that's positive to connect with them, state your intentions, even if it's to say we're going to have a quick meeting and this is what we're going to be talking about. Or as a team, I'd like us to come together and do this. Then people know what's expected of them, and it eases their mind. Think about a conversation when someone says, I want to have an important conversation with you, Tom. Half the time that they're talking, you're thinking, why did she want to talk to me? But if I tell you up front, eases your mind and you're more engaged in the conversation. I break down everything in like little tiny pieces just to make it easy. And then you have the dialogue and you leave room for questions as you told them that you would. And if you don't know the answer, say, not sure how to respond to that yet, but that's a great point. Let me think about it.
Mm. I love that, Deborah, because it's how you put that is so simple. And I guess by providing that clear structure, I feel like that's quite important for people who at the moment are probably fairly fatigued in,
Yes.
the last 18 months. So keeping it simple,
Simple,
keeping it clear.
not wordy. And
Mm.
very important part is to really honor where people are at. I mean, I'm very big on gratitude. I do a gratitude exercise every day personally. And I think that expressing gratitude for people and letting them know that you appreciate them, you appreciate their hard work, you appreciate them trying, you appreciate the effort they're making, even if they haven't achieved the goals that you hoped for them and it's not going to work out, you can still express appreciation. And I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've found throughout the pandemic that teams and workplaces have tested different methods for, um, I guess, installing a gratitude practice in their team meetings. So for some businesses, it might be that sort of that weekly stand up where there's
That
a segment that is. Um, it's one thing that you're grateful for, we share it and go around the virtual room or that kind of thing. One thing we did in our business was we just did walking meetings for about virtual walking meetings. So we're all walking around our different neighborhoods on phones,
Wow.
and we were sharing a little, I guess, a little story about where we were and what we were looking at. So for me, it might have been something as simple as I'm down near the river. I'm looking out in nature, and that makes me feel good. So just that simple stuff.
That's really good. That's really good. I interviewed 15 CEOs for an article I wrote for Inc. It was one of the first, I think it was the first article I wrote for them. And different companies do such interesting things. They'll have like a bake off or coffee together and, just do different things that are interesting. I love that idea of walking and talking about where you're at. That's really creative. Really see
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Creativity through all the chaos was important. Was important for our team, I think.
Yeah. And I think,
Deborah,
oh,
no,
sorry.
you go, jump
I,
in.
I just think part of what we're both saying is the simplifying things, that think before you have any of these conversations with people so that you can think of what the takeaways are and what the bullet points are, that as my friend in the news business says, the headlines, what are the bullet points that you want them to take away. And don't be so wordy, because typically, especially now, there's so much going on that the more succinct you can be with being, clear, but thinking ahead of time will help you to sort through the best way to say something and to prepare. And that's also really good advice for all the people on the receiving end of whatever messaging you're about to give to them.
Yeah, definitely. I think the point you just made around preparation, I think sometimes when we're under stress, we just sort of go from one meeting to the next without much thought about, okay, this meeting's about this. If you're leading the meeting, sometimes the structure and the format of what you want to run, sometimes that isn't, if it's not clear in your head as the facilitator, then it can kind of turn into a messy meeting and everyone leaves going, what was that about?
Exactly.
Mm,
You always want to know who's in charge of the meeting, and they need to behave as if they're in charge of the meeting in a nice way.
mm.
But everybody has to know you're in charge. And preparation of if it's an agenda and letting everybody know this is what we're going to cover and this is how much time we're going to spend, or we're going to go for a walk, whatever we're going to do. It's you were in charge when you were doing that. And I think that's a critical part of it. It doesn't have to be heavy, but it's being respectful of people's time, and how much information input they're having, especially we're all online a lot more, the whole Zoom fatigue stuff. And I think it's important to be respectful. So getting your message across in any way, maybe sending something as a follow-up to make sure they got it, and then, taking a step back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's great, Deborah. I'm really happy with our discussion today. I feel like we've covered off on what the Great Resignation is, some tools and strategies for leaders on how to communicate, and most importantly, how to keep it simple. Deborah, if someone wants to connect with you or your online course, what's the best way to go?
So everything I do is pretty much called the Relationship Protocol. The website is the Relationship Protocol. My book is the Relationship Protocol. And although my course is called the Communication Protocol, I switched that up a little bit. But the course is an online course, facilitated virtually. It's 8 weeks, and the transformations are pretty remarkable. We've had amazing things happen, and it's everything you're hearing about today, but on a much more granular level, so that you can really learn, how do you have the conversations, how do you build trust, how do you demonstrate commitment, resolve conflicts, all that good stuff, initiate important conversations, high stakes conversations. And on my website, I have 2 complimentary downloads. One is about building trust in an organization, and the other I referred to before, which gives you the 3 most common reasons that people don't have conversations and how to have them. So I'll support you any way I can. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to have a conversation and support your organization if I can.
I love it. And that's something that we'll be sharing with our workplace wellness, or well workplaces community, through our communication channels. So if you're listening to this, you'll be getting getting those details through the show notes and through our communications. So Deborah, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it and absolutely love the chat.
Me too. Thank you so much, Tom.